Good evening, everyone. Reading of the book Happy Life, psychographed by Divaldo Franco, and inspired by the spirit Joana de Angelis. Keep up your courage as you struggle, no matter what the situation is. Some pathways are less difficult to travel, yet all pose challenge. There is an assumption that if you work for the good of others, you yourself are exempt from obstacles and difficulties. That's a fallacy. People are the same everywhere. St. Vincent de Paul, who did so much for the poor, declared that they were very demanding and ungrateful. So have courage always. Let's pray together this evening for our friend Beto, who will be giving us a lecture. May the good spirits inspire his words so they have effect in our hearts and cause the changes necessary for our betterment. So be it. Tonight's lecture, it's Causes and Consequences of Suicide. Part 2, Beto Cabral.
They said that our house is full.
Yes, it is.
I'm not kidding.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
I believe. Good evening, everyone. It's a joy for me to be here today, speaking to you. Although it's always a hard word for me, I'm not native in this country, and I learned English in my 40s, so I apologize in advance if I made any mistake here in the language. But we have a great message to deliver today. It's the second part of the topic, suicide, cause and consequence. The first part was I basically told the story of this phenomenal Portuguese writer from the 19th century who wrote, he didn't wrote, he dictated through the fantastic mediumship of Ivone Pereira about his life, what he found on the other side of the life after he committed suicide in June 1st, 1890 in Portugal. So basically what's his story. And the book came about, as we probably know, in 1955, although he was written in 1926. It took a little long to be published for good reasons. And because this book sheds so much light in so many aspects of life that goes beyond the topic, suicide, it was always considered one of the best, one of the top books of the Spiritist literature. And after reading this book and listening to the audiobook in the form of a kind of a novel on the internet, I found a nice an interesting way to tell about the main lesson Camilo Castelo Branco shared in this book. And that is a trick. It's used in the schools to teach people about bullying, to teach the kids about bullying. But I'm going to use this in a different approach here, to talk about suicide. So let's imagine, or let's pretend this is the spirit in his purity as God created, clean and perfect. And here we're gonna write our story. We have this opportunity. But at some point in our life, when things got too rough, we do sometimes like this. We separate the spirit from the body in a sudden and violent way. And for consequence, what happened is, that's what we find after we do this. That's how we feel. Held by a force. And at this moment when we start being aware of the situation, we start begging to God for help, for forgiveness. We feel very sorry about it. But it's interesting because God, as you know, doesn't rule the world through emotions. Let's take, for example, us parents. We have kids, little kids, and whatever they do, even if it's a very bad thing, we don't feel offended. And we don't need to forgive them, because there's no point in forgiving them, because they don't know what they're doing. So that's how God looks at us. He doesn't need to forgive us. There's no point in that. The forgiveness and feeling sorry is actually a good situation, a good tool for us to raise our vibration. That's the best thing that apologies, asking for forgiveness, being sorry, feeling sorry for something that we did, help us. Because we open up, we rise our vibration, open up for the help that's always by our side, wherever the situation is. And the suicide is not different. But as soon as we get better, we feel better, and we feel able to be helped, so we feel like, just like my hand is open here, but what we find is that this is not the same as anymore. No matter how much forgiveness, how much help, how much enlightenment we can have, this is not the same anymore. Look, this is what it is. And from now on, our story is going to be written in two parts: before and after suicide. So what are we going to do with us now? What are we going to do with this? This is us after suicide. You know that the only way we can do to this piece of paper goes back to the previous state is how it is. It's through recycling process. There's no other way. We can put tape here, but we're gonna see that's just amended. So the only way we can get this back to the situation that was before, the shape that was before, is through a recycling process. But for a piece of paper like this, it's gonna take like hours, maybe days, in a recycling process. But for the spirit that committed suicide, Camilo says that 1 century, 2 century, maybe more, and the spirit suicide will be still experiencing the distaste for his disregard of the God's law. So it's a long, long process of recovering. once someone asked me, after I gave a lecture on the first part of the subject, someone asked me, why this committing a suicide or dying through suicide, the consequences is worse than when you are murdered or when you get in a car or die in a car accident, because those are also sudden and violent death. Why? So it's worse than suicide is worse than the other situations. So in Spiritism, we know through countless cases that when someone kills our bodies, we are killed by someone. What the person harm is our body only. When we get to the other side, the harmed, the damaged body stays behind. So even if we, in our spiritual body, we still feel the sensation of the wounds, the pain, it's just an illusion that the process of awakeness on the other side will gradually dissipate. The same thing with a car accident. So in suicide, the damage of the body, the physical body, is not the worst yet. It's still not the worst. Even the damage for the spiritual body is not the worst thing, because it's still illusion. It's still illusion. We see it in the books that after they are helped, they are rescued in the bad situation that they found themselves on the spiritual world, after they committed suicide, and after they are brought to the hospitals, they receive treatments on their spiritual body. They through magnetism, they have surgery, spiritual surgery. And if you read the memoir of suicide, or even the André Luiz's book, Nosso Lar, you don't see them complaining about pain or suffering in their spiritual body after they leave the hospital. So it seems like they can receive the treatment for their spiritual body to recover. So what's the problem? The problem is when we harm our own body, what we damage goes way beyond the material vehicles that we use to express ourselves in the material world or the semi-material world. It goes deeper than that. What we reach when we damage our body through suicide is actually the source of the power that keeps our life in balance. We reach our spirit. We reach what they call the deep conscious. And interesting to know that in the second Vatican Council, 1962 to 1965, was a meeting in a Catholic church where they were redesigning the rules, the dogmas of the Catholic Church or the Catholic movements. They came up with this conclusion: deep within this conscience, deep within his conscience, man discovers a law which he has not laid upon himself, but which he must obey. Its voice ever calling him to love and to do what is good and to avoid evil. Tells him inwardly. That's interesting to look. the voice comes from inside, inwardly, telling him at the right movement, do this, avoid that. In other words, what Spiritism says about this, that all the God's law is written in our conscience. And they are saying exactly the same thing. It's not interesting to see how religion is getting there, is getting the point. But although all religions are wonderful in paving the path of the man to God, I understand that that is not easy for them to deal with the suicide spirit, or to deal with the situation someone committed suicide, just because they don't consider reincarnation. They don't take reincarnation in consideration, which makes a big difference. Imagine ourselves. If we have a problematic son or daughter, teenager, the beautiful age of the being, teenage, we don't want to deal with them anymore and send them to college. If we have, in the past, if you have an enemy, we kill them, so you don't see them anymore, you don't have any more problems. Which means, in America they say, out of sight, out of mind. So easy. So that's what church do. The suicide person is someone who is like eternally lost, and the situation is not changeable. So leave it there. Don't talk about this anymore. Closed case. But Spiritism understands that physical laws and divine laws or moral laws they work pretty much the same way. It's like if we go up on a building, 3-4 stories, and jump from there, there's a law called gravity. You know that this law, or the consequence. You're gonna smash yourself on the ground, and this is a law. The punishment is gonna be in the act itself. It's not gonna be anyone punishing you. The same thing happens to the divine laws. When you try to break the divine laws, there will be nobody there punishing you, but there will be consequences of breaking this law, cause and effect. The same thing that cause and effect applies to this side of the life, applies to the other side as well. So there's no way to break the divine laws, and that's what we're trying to break. That's what we're trying to do when we commit suicide. We're trying to break a law that's not breakable. So we have to face the consequence, not that someone is punishing us. But again, religions are wonderful because they bring men close to God. And this is wonderful. They do a very good job for the families. They do a great job for people in suffering, people lost in crime, in addiction of all sorts. They do a great job. And they could do even better if they have the courage to open the door for the spirits to speak with them. Because they don't do this because they think that if they open the door, not only the good spirits are going to cross that door, also the evil spirits are going to cross and make a mess in their beliefs system. But this is the beauty of the Spiritism. Kardec opened the door for all sorts of spirits in all different levels of evolution and let them speak freely and tell us what they know about the other side of the life. Because he realized that from the good spirit, he would learn what it is to be good, what we can get from being good. And from the ignorant spirits, he could get lessons, experiences, life experiences, what it is what are the consequences of making mistakes, being in life in due respect of the divine laws. So from them we learn that. And one of these spirits to whom we are very grateful for the messages he brought to us is Camilo Castelo Branco, because he brought like so much information in a so deep form of understanding that he created this, he provided this great service to Spiritism, and it's our role to share it to humanity. So one of the, actually, it's nice to understand in this way too. If we go to a correctional facility and you want to know how it works, how it is to be there, if you ask to the directors, if you get a report from the directors, they're going to tell us about how many prisoners they can fit in there, what are the rules, what are the programs of recovery they have in place. That's the kind of things that they're going to give us. That's the kind of information they're going to give us. But if you want to know how the prisoner lives there, what they feel, what emotional state they go through when they are there, they are living there, and their experiences, their deep experiences they live there, we need to talk to the prisoner. And that's why Kardec opened the door for both the evolved and for the less evolved spirits. So, in Camilo being one of these less evolved spirits that came back to tell us his life story, he told us the story of a Brazilian man, a young Brazilian man called in the book Amadeu Ferrari, who committed suicide in the age of 37. And they were receiving lessons in the spiritual world, they were aware of the situation they were in, and they are receiving like information to prepare them to go back to life. So they have classes of different subjects. One of the subjects was self-knowledge, because they said there is no program, efficient program, to evolve or to enlighten ourselves if it doesn't go through the self-knowledge or self-discovery. If we don't know ourselves, what we are, where we came from, where we're going, in exactly time of our lives, it's very hard for us to succeed in our commitments in life. So they have this class, and this class for the suicide spirit was terrible, because they go through a past life regression section where they can face themselves in the past and understand why they are in the situation that they are now. So this man was being in the center of the room with about 100 suicide spirits participating on the class, and he was in the center of the room, sitting in a chair, and there was a mentor asking him questions. And one of the questions, he went straight to the point. Why did you take your life? Why did you try to finish or to destroy something that belongs to God, that was created by God to be perfect, to be amazing? And he gave his report as he could. He said, I got depressed. I was in bad financial situation, and I discovered that I had a cancer in my glottic area that was already eating up my throat and my tongue, and I need money, and I was working in a bank, so I stole the money to do my treatment, because or would be my treatment, I needed money to because of my health problem. But they found that he took the money. So he was in a situation that he was between the prison or his disease. And exactly in the moment when he was preparing to get married, getting prepared to get married to the woman he loved so much and was the reason of his life. So he said, I had no choice. I had no choice. So I killed myself. And the mentor asked him, and did you solve the problem? Did you feel better? Did you feel honored after you did that? And he said, no, of course not. I know I have responsibility. I made a big mistake. I'm suffering the consequences, but why God put me in that situation? A situation that I could not handle. I could not bear because I had no strength. Why God did this to me? And then the mentor explained to him, it's a very important question. It's a very good question you're making, because you need to know yourself before you go back to life, before you resume your evolutionary project. You need to know yourself better. You need to know who you are, what have you done, where you came from, and you are going to. So he raised his hand to the infinite, and in a prayer brought his cooperators close to the man, and through magnetism they started to work with him so he could remember his past. And as he remembered his past, in a big screen was showing everything to the audience. So he found himself in 1840 as a Portuguese citizen, and where he was taking many trips to Angola in Africa to grab some slaves, black, native, African, and to sell them to Brazil as a trafficker. And the worst thing is, what they saw in the screen is that this man had pleasure in inflicting pain on these people, punishing them for little wrongs, or sometimes for no reason at all. He abused them, he beat them up, and he sold them, separate them from their families. He sold the daughter here, the son there, the wife here, the husband there, and broke up the family, many families. To the point that one day in his plantation, his farm, he got this young girl, 12 years old, and raped her. The girl couldn't bear the situation, the shame of being raped, and she killed herself after. Her father, in desperate, accused him for the death of his daughter. When he knew that, he gave orders to take him. He was an old man in his 60s, old slave. They took him, and he gave orders to burn his tongue with a red hot iron. And he watched that like cold in a cold blood. So years passed through over this event. He went back to Portugal, rich, millionaire as he wanted to be, and he lived his life with the money he considered he got in an honest way. So his life was great. He got a lot of respect from society, from his family, and life went on. But one day he died. One day he died, as supposed to be. And what they see in the big screen after he died is this man running in madness through the forest in Africa, through the jungle. And behind him, chasing him, the big crowd of slaves, those who he separated from their families, those who he abused, those who wanted to ask him where are their relatives, where their relatives are. So they grabbed him, they made him a prisoner, they tortured him, they abused him to the point he went to the state of madness. He lost his mind. So they leave them alone. And for years, he still stayed there in the forest, running like a crazy person, crazy spirit, to one side, to the other side, not knowing where he was. Until the day. Oh, actually, in this time, every time he tried to stop, the few moments that he could stop and give a plea to God, the only thing he answered he heard in answer was the crying of the slaves, again asking him for the location of their relatives. So this is what the situation he stayed in until one day when he was exhausted, he was totally unaware of himself, and he saw in an open space in the forest a spirit of a black slave coming in his direction, holding a torch that illuminated the place, and he could finally see where he was. And he recognized that old slave who he burned the tongue. But the slave was in a different condition. He had forgiven Amadeu. He was coming to help him. So he came, and still with that way that the black slaves used to talk, said, "Come here, Nhonho. Come with me. I'm gonna take you out of here," and brought him to a place where he could be treated and helped. So at this point, Amadeu Ferrari started to shake in his chair. He was shaking. He was having seizures. He was desperate, knowing himself. And he starts saying, "What a disgrace. What a terrible person I am. How could I do this? How could I have done all this to this man or all these people? I'm terrible." And he started to repeat the same plea he sent to God in that time, before his past reincarnation, when he said, "Please, God, allow me to go back to life and let some sort of malady take care of my throat and my tongue and burn it out and invade it and eat it up. The way I will never complain about anything anymore. And let me be a disgusting person that nobody wants to be close to me, and they're going to leave me by myself when I'm going to have time to think about things I've done." He asked this for God. So the mentor said, "Well, this is the same thing you said. And it's important that you really go back to life and experience the consequence of what you have done. But," and then he stopped and he made a signal, and the side door opened, and a man came into the room. It was the same slave. His name was Felicio. The same old black slave came into the room. As Amadeu saw him, he went to his knees and started crying and desperate and asking, "Please take me out of here. I can't handle this." But as the spirit was walking in his direction, by the power of his own mind, he started to change his appearance. and he turning into his father of the present incarnation, Romulo Ferrari. And he saw him. I said, it's not possible. My father helped me. But the thing is, the African population in the past century wasn't, as they say, wasn't made only with the spirits in a lower level of evolution, or those still in primitive or in the beginning of the journey on Earth. They were not all inferior in the matter of spiritual evolution. Let's put this way. Many of them were the reincarnation of the immanent people from Rome Empire. All those soldiers, the governors from the time of Caesar and other emperors, who terribly abused from the people, from the Christians. They were incarnating in Africa. They committed to this purpose, to reincarnate in Africa, to practice humility, to learn how to serve. So they went through this experience, which in any way justify what was done to the slaves in Brazil. And even the mentor says in the book, the Brazilian society nowadays are experiencing the consequences of what they have done to the slaves in the past. Because it wasn't an individual mistake, instead it was a collective mistake. The whole society, Brazilian society, is paying for that now, is experiencing the result of that. And still, for a long time, it will be experienced the consequence of all the abuse they did to the black slaves in the past. So the Felicio was one of the Roman spirits who reincarnated in Africa. And after he died, he understood the situation. He forgave Amadeu. And he came back to help him and offered to reincarnate as his father to help him. And now he was back to help him as a spirit, a suicide spirit. Still was available and willing to help him. So this story tells us how beautifully the universe works to fix our our wrongdoings, the mistakes we do, the bad choices we take in life. How things go through time, even if sometimes a long time, but how the universe works, how the divine laws work to get us back to track, put us back in place of balance, where we can again be in possession of our own destiny, so we can resume our evolutionary path. And it's interesting to think, if the universe works through laws, how can we consider the gods, the love of God, the God's mercy? Where are these things? Where are we gonna fit these things? All the good things that God has to us, if there's law and there's cause and effect, and everything we do, we have to face the consequence. Where the God's love and God's mercy is gonna fit in this, in the situations? It's a good question, isn't it? I have this person. Hold on, I lost my. Oh, okay. We saw through this story how the opportunity is given to us as many times as we need, as long as we are willing to put ourselves in a situation that we can be helped. So many opportunities we're gonna have to restart and do different that we have done. But one thing that I like to highlight here in this story that I just told is the mentor. At some point he says, pay attention, before he starts showing this story, he says, pay attention to the story of this man, because the story of this man is the story of each one of you. And then I would think about it and say, okay, they were audience packed with suicide spirit. But then I start thinking about it. You know that the WHO, which became very popular now because of the coronavirus, the World Organization, or Health Organization, released in 2016 the information that only in 2016 we have in the world, the whole world, 800,000 suicide. 800,000 in 1 year. People used to break this in days and minutes and seconds to realize that if it was like lined up, it would be 1 suicide every 40 seconds, which is terrible. But if in 1 year 800,000 people die by suicide, in 2 years, I start putting numbers out so I could think about this. In 2 years, we're going to have 1,600,000 people. In 5 years, we're going to have 4 million people. Only in 5 years that committed suicide. And it's curious, when you read the book that was written in 1926 by Camilo, they said, suicide in our days is epidemic. 1926. Of course, because the population was much smaller, 100 people would be considered epidemic. And now, in 7 billion, 800 is epidemic as well. So, from that time to now, how many? Can you imagine how many? And the thing is, the suicide spirit needs to be brought to life as quick as possible. Not like in days, in months, but in years. But as quick as possible, because when they go to the spirit and when they throw themselves on the spiritual, they do this in a legal way. So they are considered illegal immigrants on the spiritual world. They don't belong there. They are there against the law. And they only can help them so much. They cannot help them endlessly, because there's a point that they cannot deal with the anguish that goes inside of their hearts anymore. So Camilo says, the mind wants to be happy, but the heart doesn't allow it to happen. So in this process, all these people, all these spirits, all this reincarnation, I start to think, how many of us are suicide spirits? Maybe when we learn all these things, it's not in the future and about what's gonna happen if he committed suicide, that we should focus our attention. I believe that we should focus our attention on the possibility that we are ourselves already a suicide spirit, reincarnated. And you can think about yourself like, do I give up things easily? Do I run away from responsibility in this life easily? These things are we can start thinking about ourselves, our past, and see if we see traces of this in our life. I don't want to scare anybody, but the statistic is too big to not consider this possibility, right? So so the question would be, in this case, what should we do about it? What should we do about it? And I remember once I was talking to a friend, and he was telling me that he went through a bad situation in life. He made a lot of mistakes. And one day, he decided to make room for God in his life. Have you heard this expression? I need to make room for God in my life. And then I thought, he didn't learn the lesson yet. He didn't still learn the lesson. He's actually far away from learning the lesson. Because room, think about it, room is a place where ungrateful children put their old parents, old grandparents, so they can raise their family away from those old-fashioned, out-of-date people, to not expose their children to them many times. Or worse, the room is a place where we throw things that we don't need to use often. So we store things that we don't need in a room. So making room for God in our life is not really a good thing as we think it is. Because the good thing to do, the right thing to do, is to place God in the center of our lives. Right in the center of our life. And surrender to God our difficulties. Those things that we are not able to do. That we are not strong enough to do. Things that we need to change in ourselves, but we are not strong enough to do it. And you have to admit that. And I'm going to tell a testimony of myself. So it's good to confess ourselves, so we're not talking about someone else. We're going to talk about ourselves. I made a mistake repeatedly in a certain area of my life. It was a kind of a bad habit I had. And many times I feel and I knew I wasn't strong enough to overcome that thing. It was something that I just couldn't. If you look at yourself, you're going to find something that you just couldn't do it because it's stronger than you. And one day I came to this realization. So I asked to God, I spoke to God and asked him to take care of this. Take care of this for me because I can't do this. And I know that's wrong. I know I have to stop it. And please take care of this. After that, I started to noticing something very interesting. Every time I wanted to do that, which involved other people, which is worse, it was not only me involving other people, I noticed that something happened. Something always happened to prevent me to do that. And then I started to realize that, well, God is still really taking care of this for me. And in the meantime, I could do what I can. I could change myself things what I can, where I have strength to do it. So I started working the things that I could take care of. And I'm still doing. And I still have the problem. And still God is taking care of that. And I confess to you, I still, even after that, not anymore, but I still try to do that. But not because I want it, or not because not because I want it, but because it was stronger than me. And then I started to notice that even thinking about doing that, things start to happen to prevent me from doing that. was just amazing to see how God was taking care of it. And I confess, I didn't stop doing this because I didn't want. I still sometimes want it because I'm weak. It's not because I'm a bad person, but because I'm weak, as everybody has. No, every one of you has your weakness in some point of your life, in some part of your life. But I'm very thankful for who inspired me this, because I see clearly God taking care of my life, this part of my life that I cannot handle. And Spiritism teaches that by God, we know that there are spirits, friends on the other side of life, who make the God's love reach us, or they are in the middle of God and us. He has his workers doing the work he needs to do here on earth with us. So when we incarnate, as we said in the last lecture, we had this place where we stayed when we were there. We have our registration there. We are the spirits that sign up for us to reincarnate, and they are responsible for our reincarnation. And as many times, no matter when, no matter what we need from them, they will be here with us, helping us. This is the beauty of the Spiritism teachings. We know that we are not alone, and they are always here with us, helping us. And the only way, or the only time they cannot help us is when we close the door for them. Through ingratitude, through rebelliousness, through stubbornness. That's right, say that. So this is only the time that they have no access to us. So they let us to go by ourselves and experience the consequence of our choices. So this is the right thing to do wherever we are in this situation of reincarnated suicide spirits or not. This is the best thing to do. Put God in the center of our lives and let God handle. Let God let me read the last paragraph for you, because I think I'm not going to be able to say it the way it's written here. What is bigger than us, we surrender to Him. In the meantime, we work on what we can change in our lives. Practice our humility, gratitude, reverence, and fine-tune with God. So one day we will be stronger, and we won't be the ones who God helps, but the one God uses to rebuild other souls. It's great, isn't it? So in the book, just as a conclusion here, in the book Vine of Light, which I believe it wasn't translated in English yet, so I did a rough translation of one of the paragraphs that says, if your staying in a place of limitation is taking too long, be aware that all limitation and suffering were given to you as an answer to your request of help, protection, and the necessary lessons in consideration to eternal life. Meaning, wherever we are facing now in our lives, all the hardship we can be bearing, there is a reason for that. There's definitely something that we asked for, because that was exactly what we need. If it was given to us, maybe easy life, happiness, everything easy, we probably, and more certainly, that we go back to the same pattern of mistakes we did in the past. So the conclusion is although what God reserves to us on the other side, in the future life, because this life is not the real one where we're going to be forever. But on the other side, as we reach a certain level of evolution, the reward for that is going to be unimaginable. So it's worth it to struggle, to do our best, and realize that this life on earth, especially in this moment we're living now, is not a life for us to seek happiness only. In disregard of all the responsibilities we have. It's not a time, it's still not a time for happiness. As Jesus said, that happiness is somewhere else, is beyond, not in the situation yet for us. But it's good that we know that this is real, that not like a religious thought only. There's not something vague or something that someone told and we have no confirmation if it's true or not, because through the spirits, both evolved and less evolved, we have all the information that this is real. As soon as we get in certain level of evolution, we're going to look back and this is not going to affect us anymore, all this hardship we're going through now in this life. So this is the message. I hope I was able to pass something useful that you can think about it, you can meditate, and at some point of your life you can remember something. And I hope I was able to pass along what Camilo Castelo Branco, the great work he did on this book. And if any one of you who speaks Portuguese, who understands Portuguese, wants to don't have time to read the book, which is in Portuguese and in English, there is on YouTube, there is a novel, kind of a radio novel, I don't know how to say in English, rádio novela, of this book, which is amazing with the professionals, actors, sound effect, original music. It's amazing. And there's so much to learn from that. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and God help us.